Welcome everyone to Jackson-Josephine County's Small Woodlands Association presentation, Big Cats in the Forest, Cougars and Bobcats, presented by Mathew Vargas. My name is Jerry Burke and I will be your host. Tonight we will have a presentation for about an hour and then an opportunity to pose questions to the presenter. Please write your questions in the chat window where they will be read after the presentation. Speaker Mathew Vargas has been the wildlife conflict biologist at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Rogue Watershed District for the last 5 years, based in the Central Point office in Jackson County. He graduated from Oregon State University with a degree in biology. His main duties include managing all human-wildlife conflict issues and coordinating with all of the wildlife rehabilitation and holding facilities within our district. This includes all of Jackson, Josephine, and Curry counties. In addition, he assists in various biological surveys, habitat improvement projects, regulatory setting processes, and helps manage various recreational activities. Please welcome Mathew Vargas.
All right, thank you. Good to be here this evening talking with you guys. That was a good introduction there. Pretty much covered everything for me. So yeah, tonight I will be discussing our two big cats who were in the forest, Cougars and Bobcats. Again, just want to reiterate that my district here is in Southern Oregon, Jackson, Josephine, Curry County. We have 22 districts in the state, kind of split up in similar fashions, all with their own staff, and they all kind of present their unique management challenges and styles. So I will be going over a lot of broader statewide issues here, but a lot of it's going to be focused here in Southern Oregon specifically. Yeah, let's get started here. And I'm going to go through this here, and like as was mentioned, we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. And that's always one of my favorite parts is the questions, because we get to go off on different branches that I normally wouldn't think of, and kind of have a discussion in some other senses that can really be engaging and informational to everybody. So just to start here, I like to start my presentations with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's mission. You can read it here. The mission is to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations. So essentially, we are managers of the wildlife in Oregon for the people. For their enjoyment, and that includes all forms of enjoyment, whether it be consumptive, things like fishing, hunting, recreational trapping, or non-consumptive, bird watchers, photographers, just hikers in general. We want to provide opportunity for all groups, and we want to do so while protecting Oregon's wildlife. So it's a balance that we have. Our main goal is to ensure healthy wildlife populations, but parallel to that, we want those groups of wildlife to be able to be enjoyed by people. So we're constantly balancing that. That's kind of at the heart of all of our management decisions. And you'll kind of see that today as we go through the two different species of wildlife we're going to be talking about. So let's get started. I'm going to kind of jump into Bobcats here first, mostly because they're not as in depth as Cougars. And me personally, I like Cougars. I like Bobcats too, but Cougars are my favorite. So we'll go into those later. But starting here with Bobcats. So Bobcats are abundant throughout Oregon. We have them just about in every corner of the state. And whether it's down even in the desert, there's bobcats there. You go to the coastal jungles, there's bobcats there. The high Cascades or Blue Mountains, we got bobcats everywhere. There's a lot of them. They're all over the place, and they're doing very well overall in Oregon. Again, very adaptable to different habitat types, like I just mentioned, and prey conditions. They're obligate carnivores, so they're going to be feeding on meat. Most of the time, they are going to prefer, like most cats, things they kill themselves. They will scavenge on occasion if necessary, but their main preference is they're hunters. They're gonna eat what they kill. For bobcats, that could be anything from small rodents to squirrels to even smaller carnivores if they can catch them, such as American pine martens, or we do have some populations of fishers here in Southern Oregon. It's well within a bobcat's prey base. To things like birds, if they can catch it, they're going to eat it. There's been several documented cases of bobcats going after different types of forest grouse and quail. So those are components or two big sources of food. And then we even have documentation of them going after larger stuff like deer. So pretty impressive when you think about the bobcat size. Over here in Southern Oregon, a big mature bobcat, big mature male is going to be about 30 pounds. And they have been known to take down large, fully grown deer, weighing, well over 100 pounds. Now, that's not to say they always go after those large deer. There's a certain amount of risk when they're going after bigger prey like that. So most of the deer that they eat are going to be the younger deer and fawns in the summer and early fall. And then bobcats kind of classified in Oregon as a fur-bearing mammal. So basically what that means, we have a variety of classifications for different species in Oregon. All of them come with their own set of regulations and protections, and fur-bearing mammal puts a fair amount of protection on the bobcat while still allowing for recreational harvest. So there is a season for bobcats, and there's certain licensing and tag requirements, and that comes along with a lot of different reporting and management criteria. So I did want to throw up this little flyer we have because, like was mentioned in the intro, I deal a lot with wildlife conflict. So essentially, I'm sort of the first line of the first person people talk to when they call our office wanting to report wildlife or having issues with wildlife. And more often than not, people call and report a lynx. They want to report a lynx, whether it's a sighting or going after their chickens or something like that. And we don't have lynx here in Southern Oregon. At least we haven't documented any. So a lot of times people are mistaking a bobcat for a lynx. So I just want to throw this up just to kind of get a good idea of the difference. We do have some documentation of lynx in the state of Oregon. All have been in the very northeast corner in the Blue Mountains. Very, very few though. Essentially, anywhere else in Oregon, it's bobcat. Even if you're up there, chances are it's going to be bobcat. But the main difference is the lynx got a little bigger footprint. The long ear tufts and sort of the facial tufts that come down are going to be present on the lynx. Lynx are a little bigger, and then the tail, of course, all black versus the bobcat, which just has black on the top. So they are very similar. A bobcat also is going to be a lot more spotted on the belly compared to the lynx. So just to keep in mind, if you're here in Southern Oregon and you see something that you're wondering, oh, maybe that's a lynx. Well, it'd be highly unlikely to be a lynx. It's likely a bobcat. So, as I mentioned earlier, bobcats are a fur-bearing mammal, which comes with some different management criteria. And that management we do with these bobcats is really the main source of our data. So we we with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, we don't have a set number, say, of how many bobcats we think are in the state. Um, what we're looking at instead of a number is the population in the state healthy, and mainly that's due to the sheer number of bobcats in the state. There's a lot of bobcats here, and so to get an exact number would be quite difficult. So what we do instead, we look at the population overall, and we do that mainly through what the results are we're getting from our recreational harvest that we do have. So just real briefly about the recreational harvest. It's a specific season that runs from December 1st through the end of February. So it's a 3-month season. Depending where you're at in the state, determines how many bobcats a hunter or a trapper can legally take. And all of those bobcats that they take are checked in at our office in person, where we can get information that's on this yellow sheet here. So we got their name, we got whether it was a male or a female, how it was taken, where it was taken, which all goes into our estimates. And then each bobcat is sealed with a CITES tag. You can see down here these orange tags. There's an individual number on those, and those are nationwide. Proves that the bobcat was checked in and all the critical data was gathered from it. And then in addition to that, we take the bottom jaw of the bobcats that hunters and trappers get. And the bottom jaw is sort of the key piece to all this, because what we can do from that is we can take that jaw and we could remove one of the teeth. And we then send that tooth to a laboratory, which can use microscopic analysis to basically cross-section that tooth and do the layers of cementum that get laid down each year. And basically, you can get a very accurate age for these animals. So that age, along with the sex of the animal and the location of the animal, all can go into various different models we have that can indicate whether the population is healthy, overall throughout the state. So we kind of got the 4 metrics here: harvest of bobcats versus participation, proportion of females, proportion of younger animals, and then the age of the harvest. So a harvest versus participation. This is kind of one. This is least most important one out of those. And that's mainly due to the fact that it's only loosely correlated. So you if you look at this graph here, we've got the orange line here. That's bobcats harvested throughout the years. We've got years on the x-axis and numbers of individuals on the y-axis. And then the blue line is number of fur takers. So you could kind of see here at the beginning, bobcats are going down a little bit, fur takers are steady, and you have a little bit of increase in fur takers, and then a super big jump in bobcats harvested, and then towards the end you see a little bit of down trend on both of them. So it's a loosely correlated metric, so it's not as important as the other ones, because there's a various number of factors that can influence participation and harvest. Not just a bobcat population, whether that be weather. A lot of these fur takers, they go out in the weather. If it's a heavy snowy year, they might not be able to get up high enough, or the roads might not be accessible for them to go be as active as they normally would. Conversely, if it's a warm, dry year, that can make for difficult conditions for them as well. The other main one is pelt price. These Bobcat pelts, they are sold for the most part. The markets are largely influenced by China and Russia. So depending on the fur demand over there, it can jump on the pelt prices quite a bit over here for trappers and hunters. And what we see is when prices are high, people are more motivated to go out. When prices are low, they're more motivated to stay in. I will add to that briefly that nobody in the state of Oregon is making a living off trapping anymore. Nobody's getting rich from it. It's more of a hobby for people, and it's more a way for them to kind of connect with Oregon's traditional roots of trapping and what a lot of trappers did back in the 1800s. So whether pelt prices are, even if they're extremely high, you're not even really covering gas money most of the time. So it can there's just, my point is, there's a variety of factors here that make this not a good sole determining factor of the bobcat population. But it does help. It does go into the overall big picture of things. So this is where it gets a little more important. So if for those of you that don't know, in biology, when you're looking at populations over large areas or small areas, females have a much greater influence on maintaining and growing that population than males do. A real quick simplified example of that is, let's say you had 10 animals in a population, 8 are female, 2 are male. Okay, so you have that. Theoretically, those 2 males are going to breed the 8 females. The next year, you're going to have, let's say whatever animal this is, we could say bobcats, and let's say they just each of those females just have a litter of 1. So the next year, they're all bred. They're going to have 8 young that are going to get added to that population. Okay, so you take away a male from that population. So now you have the 8 females and 1 male. Well, that 1 male, he's still going to be able to breed all 8 of those females. So the next year, you're still going to have 8 new animals added to the population. Conversely, if you take away a female, now you have 7 females, 2 males going into it. Now, next year, you're only going to have 7 animals added to that population. So that's a very simplified and quick explanation of that. But it's just important to know that females have a much greater influence on the population in whole and how it grows and how it's maintained. So females in the harvest for bobcats is an important metric, much more important than the last slide. This is kind of one of the main things we look at on, do we have a healthy population? So in this graph here, the orange line represents kind of our line of concern. That's at 25% of females taken each year in the harvest. So the y-axis here, this is total harvest per each, x-axis is year. So each year's harvest, and then this y-axis is the percent of that year's harvest being female, being adult female. So orange line is 25%, and that 25 to 35% is kind of where we if they start getting in there, we start looking at it a little more. We don't want it above 35%. So as you can see here in this graph, it is below 25%. So we are doing very well overall population-wise for females in the harvest. So essentially, takeaway of this slide is percent female in the harvest is very low, which means there's a lot of females out there. There's a lot of other animals out there that are comprising the harvest. Plenty of animals for reproduction and population. And then finally, the bobcat mean age for Western Oregon. That's the other important one we'll look at. Again, real quick, we got each year's harvest here on the x-axis. On the y-axis is the mean age of that year's harvest. I mentioned adult female earlier on the last slide. We do consider mature adults 3 years or older. So that's this orange line here. So that's kind of when they can breed before then, but that's when they're, adult. The main breeding core is 3 years and older for bobcats. And then you see this yellow line here at 2 years old. So what that's representing is the younger age class animals. So 1 to 2 year olds, which can be a very influential group in the population. So what we want to see is the harvest above that for mean age. When you're harvesting mainly older class animals, and you're continually harvesting older class animals, it's basically showing that there's a very good supply of younger animals to fill in that older age group. If this blue line here, which is the harvest, were to drop in here, we'd start seeing a little bit of concern that we're missing an older age class, a group. We're missing this group essentially, and which is our main breeding group. So it would indicate that a downtrend is coming fairly quickly in the future, which could spell trouble for the bobcat populations. So in summary, our bobcat population is doing well in the state overall. We have a lot of bobcats. They're kind of all over. They're very active and adaptable to various prey and habitats. And we're doing really well on bobcats. So that's kind of where I'd end it right now for bobcats. When we get to the end, I'd be more willing to talk questions on those. But I kind of want to jump into cougars now, just because there's a little more to talk about with cougars, and I want to leave plenty of time for that. So again, cougars, very abundant throughout the state, come in all different kinds of names. The two most popular in Oregon are cougars or mountain lions, but puma is a common term for them. A little less common, but I've heard it used quite a bit, is catamount, kind of slang for cat of the mountains. Kind of a cool name. Again, very adaptable creatures to habitat and prey conditions. In this picture here, this is kind of modeled cougar habitat in the state of Oregon. And this is mainly derived from our hunter harvest data. Again, with cougars, as with bobcats, a lot of our data is from consumptive users like hunters. It's just a very wide-reaching resource we have. You have hundreds or thousands of hunters out, basically bringing us this data that is vital to us. We if it was just up to us to go out and collect all the data that we get from hunters, we couldn't do it. We just don't have the manpower. So again, like with the bobcats, a lot of this data is derived from consumptive users, and we do have some of the best cougar data in the Western United States. We've been collecting data for a long time. It's a vast data set, and I'll go into that a little bit more about what we collect and why. But for now, basically, all I want to point out with this map is you can see how widespread cougars are. So all the green is considered high, very good cougar habitat, high densities of cougars. The red is very low density, not great habitat. And that's not to say cougars won't be in this red stuff. I mean, you'll notice there's a pattern here, right? You got the red here, the Willamette Valley. You got the red here in Medford, so Bend area, the desert, the very, very driest, most plain portions of the desert, and then the agricultural fields of Columbia Basin. So it makes sense in those areas that there wouldn't be too many cougars. But I can tell you for a fact, we get cougars in downtown Medford every now and then. So, you know, just because it's red doesn't mean they're not there. It just means it's less likely there. And then so finally with that, cougars, unlike bobcats, which are classified as a fur-bearing mammal, cougars are classified as a game mammal. Very similar classifications, again, allows for recreational harvest, but it sort of elevates it one notch. It elevates it one notch, and not really in protections per se, but in how focused we are and the agency resources going into it. As you can imagine, cougars are, they can be a very controversial species for some people. You know, you got people that respect them and love them, and then you got some people that may not have as much love for them because they are causing problems with livestock, or some people have just an innate fear of cougars when they're out in the woods. But we'll go over that some more in a little bit. So to start off talking a little bit more about cougars, I want to go into their kind of prey base here. So again, cougars, they're very, very opportunistic hunters. Again, they are hunters. They're all carnivores, and they are hunters. They will eat dead meat. They will scavenge every now and then, but they very much prefer meat that they've killed themselves. And they will kill things very small, just like bobcats will. They will kill skunks to eat. They will kill smaller mammals, even mice or squirrels if they can catch them. They will catch, again, forest grouse if they can catch them. But their main source of food is deer. You will have cougars go after elk every now and then. It's a little hard for a cougar to take down a full-grown elk, but they will do it. But elk calves, absolutely, that's an easy meal for them. But deer are by far their preferred meal, and they'll, there's various estimates on how many deer an individual cougar will eat. I would think the major consensus is one deer every week to 10 days, something like that. So this is a trail camera photo we have. But this is a blacktail buck here from the Cascades. It's a little hard to see who's moving his head during this photo, but he does have antlers. He's a fairly mature buck, munching on some grass in the middle of the night. And I would like to point out the date and time down here. So July 27th, and this is AM here, so it's 1:45 AM. So right in the middle of the night. We had caught kind of a cool sequence here that is kind of rare. So you had 1:45 at night, and then you have about 18 minutes later at 2 a.m. You see this big blur. Well, I'm sure some of you can guess what this is since our topic's about cougars, but here you can see the buck's antlers. This is the buck's eye, and you sort of make out the cougar head and the tail coming down. This is the cougar foot. So my best guess is this is right when the cougar jumped on it. And if you go one more slide, things clear up a little bit. You see the antlers there a little more clearly. You can see the cougar's ear, definite tail there. The deer's legs. There's the deer's tail with the distinctive black tail they have, legs going down here. So this cougar got this buck. Again, 2 a.m. on the 27th. We'll go one more slide. The 27th. Now this is at 6 a.m. So photos a little washed out. These cameras, when they in that twilight zone in the early mornings, that infrared flash still comes on. So a little washed out, but you can see the cougar here. It's got a nice full belly. He drug this buck off up here overnight and continued to feed on it. And I actually have several more pictures throughout the day into the next evening of him kind of just walking back and forth, hanging out. So he fed on it for quite a while. Of course, I knew none of this when I got this camera, and when I got back to my office and I looked through the pictures, I thought it was pretty cool. So I actually went back up there the next day, and I did find the deer carcass. All that was left was a few bones and the antlers. So just kind of shows, they're very good hunters, and they like deer. So just a cool set of photos there to show you guys on what they eat. So here's, I know this picture's a little gruesome here, but I think it really demonstrates how a cougar kills. So I wanted to include it. Again, part of my job is wildlife conflict. So when farmers and ranchers have issues like this, I usually the one that gets called. But this was a cougar that got this sheep here. You can't really see it from this photo, but cougars, like you saw in the previous photo with the deer, they go after the head and neck area with their jaws. That's where they go. They'll bite down, and they usually don't. Once they bite, they usually don't let go until the animal's dead. So, of course, this sheep, it did have a bite mark under the wool there by the head and neck. Once the animal's dead, that's what this photo is kind of demonstrating here. Cougars that almost always, they'll go in through the front here like this. And what they're trying to do is get in there to the very nutrient rich organs, the heart, the lungs, usually sometimes the liver, and they'll eat those first. They'll usually eat a little bit of shoulder meat like this going in. They'll get those organs, and then they'll leave it. And it's very typical for cougars to leave a carcass like this. So they kill it overnight. They go in and eat it to this point. And sometimes they'll bury it after that a little bit if there's leaves or dirt around. And then they'll leave. And so a lot of times farmers and ranchers will find them like this. That's just what they do. And what happens is the following evening, so the first night they kill it, when it gets daylight, they leave. And then that following evening, the second night, they'll come back and they'll finish eating whatever they want off of this. So that's usually when they're just going to gorge themselves. They'll go in, they'll eat the rest of the muscles on the shoulders, the hind end, the back, the neck. They'll fit as much as possible in their stomach, and then they're gone. And that's usually how a lot of cougar predations work. They'll kill something, they'll eat those nutrient rich organs, they'll kind of digest that for a little bit, come back and eat the rest, or eat as much as they can. Those previous pictures with the deer kind of demonstrate that as well, with how long that cougar stayed in the area. He killed that deer at 2 a.m. in the morning, and he was there. I mean, he was almost there 24 hours. So they'll feed on something for quite a while until they get their fill. So now we'll go a little bit into management here. Oregon's cougar management is dictated by our Oregon Cougar Management Plan. You can see we've had a plan of some sorts for quite a while. It gets updated every now and then. Our most recent edition was in 2017. And this is available if anybody's interested in reading the management plan. It's got a lot of information on cougars. It has a lot what I'm going to talk about, but a lot of additional information. So if you're interested in that, I just recommend you hop on Google and type in ODFW Cougar Management Plan, and probably one of the first results is going to be a PDF of this plan. So our cougar management, these are our main objectives in the plan. And they've kind of been our main objectives since about the mid 2000s. Our plan, even though we've had some updates of the actual plan since then, our main objectives have remained pretty steady since about 2005. Objective number one, cougar population not below 3,000 cougars. Go into that a little later, but suffice it to say we are well above that right now. And then with that, objective 2 and 3 is kind of managing conflicts, both with human safety and livestock. And then objective 4 is populations in concert with other game animals. So you guys just saw the photos of a cougar eating deer. Well, here in Southern Oregon, that's not too much of an issue. We got lots of deer, we got lots of cougars also, but our deer populations are strong. But in other parts of the state, our mule deer populations, especially in certain areas in Eastern Oregon, are not doing very well at all. Cougars, being the efficient hunters they are, can have an effect on those populations. And it's kind of a balancing act of keeping ungulate populations healthy while managing cougar populations, and we got to strike a balance with that. So a big population, or a big part of the cougar management plan is managing those populations so other populations in the state of other species, ungulates in particular, are healthy. So a little bit into data collection. So like I think I mentioned earlier, cougars, a lot of our data is from consumptive users, hunters. We have an extremely good data set, one of the best, I think, in the Western United States when it comes to cougars. And part of that is because of the requirements that we have when it comes to deceased cougars. So essentially every cougar in the state of Oregon that is dead that we know about, so whether it's a hunter, a roadkill, an administrative kill, illegal kill, if our agency finds out about a carcass, we collect this data. It is required to be checked in at our office. We collect this data, so we have a very good data set. So these are kind of the three main things we physically collect from the cougar. So down here, this is a picture. This is actually a taxidermy mount of a cougar we have in our office, but it shows very well the tooth that we collect. So this is a premolar right here. It's the very first tooth behind this big canine on top, and there's one on either side of the cougar. So, and we need both of those. Cougar teeth, unlike other teeth, are very difficult to age with that cementum analysis, like I was talking about. So we take one tooth from there, one tooth from the other side, and both of those teeth go off, and they're it's to confirm the age, make sure the age is accurate. And part of that is their reproductive cycles of cougars. I'll get into that later, why it's so difficult. But so that the tooth gives us age. Then right here we have, this is a reproductive tract of a cougar. These are the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and the uterine horn here. And then these are the ovaries, just zoomed in a little bit. And what those do, when a female cougar has kittens, it'll actually leave scars in these tubes here, as well as marks in the ovaries. So we can plug that in for some reproductive data, how many kittens we might have had that year. it goes into various models, and this adds our reproductive data. But this is a cougar. Obviously, this one doesn't have kittens. You can see Sharpie is very tiny. It's real thin. This is probably from a younger cougar that probably hasn't had kittens yet in its life, or if so, it's only had maybe 1 or 2 litters. And then here you can see the number. Each cougar that gets checked in gets a number, ML for mountain lion, and then a 5-digit number along with that. And that just ties all this data together. And in addition to these physical samples we're collecting, the time, the date and location it was killed is also important, and then the sex of the animal. And all of this goes into a sex age kill model we have that unlike bobcats will give us a fairly accurate number of cougars in the state, which we'll go into in a couple slides here. But that's the bulk of our data collection. And you saw from the very first slide with cougars that while we have cougars throughout the state, not all areas are necessarily created equal in the state. So we have management zones, and the state's broken up into these zones. Us here in Jackson-Josephine County, we're in Zone B, which is Southwest Cascades. And then my district that I deal with also has part of Zone A in it as well. And each of these zones is kind of its own management section. We don't necessarily manage them any different, but the amount of cougars that are allowed to be taken out of each zone is different. So we'll get in that in a few minutes. But actually, I'll just briefly talk about it now. Each zone has a quota of cougars that every calendar year that we allow to legally be taken out of that zone. For example, our zone, Southwest Zone B, is 200 cougars. I will say that I don't think that quota has ever been met in our zone. That's a lot of cougars. As a matter of fact, as of right now in 2021, we're almost done with the year, and I think we're only at 110 cougars for the year. And when I say that, that's not just consumptive users like hunters. That's total cougar mortalities. So that includes road kills, administrative kills, human safety kills, damage kills. I mean, it's everything. And once that quota is met, everything's shut down for that year until the end of the year. So we do control the harvest, not only harvest, but just total mortalities. We monitor them very closely and try to control as best we can to follow our cougar management plan. So cougars population trend. I'll start by saying our estimate. So here we got the 2017 estimate. You see there at about 6,600 cougars. That's essentially about the same as it is now in 2020. We've kind of plateaued for cougars in the last several years. But going over this graph here, so we got years on the bottom on the x-axis and total cougar population stayed on the y-axis. So we start back here in 1928. You know, these are estimates here. Our data gets really good towards the end. But we had in Oregon for a very long time, basically uncontrolled mortality. There was a bounty on cougars, actually. They had zero protections, and people could just shoot them and kill them. Frankly, people didn't want them back then. They were considered a nuisance. They were considered a waste of time and money that are killing livestock and, you know, could potentially get people. So it was a very different attitude back then. And basically what it led to was, you could see here in the early 60s, they were almost extirpated from the state. We had an estimated less than 300 cougars in the entire state. And at that time, it was decided by the state game commission at the time that cougars, they might have some economical value, and they have, we want them here in the state, so they put on they put them in regulations. Basically, they classified them as a game mammal instead of an unprotected mammal. And essentially, what that did was it gave them protections. You couldn't just go out and kill a cougar. You had to have cougar tag. There was controlled mortality, um, and for a long time, those hunts they weren't over the counter. You had to apply for a hunt and kind of went through a lottery. And if you drew a tag, then you were able to go hunt a cougar, and that happened for quite a while. Most of this time period was hound hunting, and you can see there was quite a rebound as soon as we put them as a status of a game mammal. Um, and right here, it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see, you kind of got it going up, and there's a little kink where it kind of shoots up a little more, where it gets a little steeper. The population starts growing a little more, and what that correlates to was about 1994 or 95. Um, and for those of you that might remember, in 94, Oregon voters passed Measure 18 on the ballot, which essentially did two things. One, it prohibited the baiting of bears by hunters, and two, the hunting of cougars with hounds. Um, so, and that caused a big change for us as an agency with managing cougars, and it took some time essentially to catch up because now a person going out to hunt a cougar who had a very high success rate went down to a very low success rate. And even today, most cougars killed by hunters are killed just incidentally when the hunter is out hunting deer or elk, and they just happen to have a cougar tag in their pocket and they happen to see a cougar. It's pretty rare for a person to go out targeting cougars and actually be successful at killing one. So that's kind of that. We saw the population shoot up a little faster. It starts plateauing a little bit, and really, like I said, this ends in 2017. You're at 6,600, but even now in 2021, we're still at about that 6,600 range, and basically we have a lot of cougars. They're everywhere, and I think we've reached a sort of equilibrium with the amount of available habitat and available prey source out there for them, that we're kind of at the carrying capacity of the state right now, 6,600. So well above the 3,000 minimum we have in our management plan. So cougar population is doing very good in the state. And with any model in wildlife biology, there is a little bit of a variation. I can't think of the words, but anyway, so 6,600 is kind of the estimate, but the model does theoretically project as many as 7,600 cougars. So back to the population monitoring. So population is good. It's well above our management of 3,000. It's kind of plateaued. Well, how do we know we're not going to see a downtrend? Well, kind of the same as the bobcats we spoke about earlier. Again, those adult females, 3 years and older, is a very important age class, as I kind of explained with the bobcats. So that's kind of what we use to determine the health of the population. So this figure is a little bit busy here, but essentially, again, we have the year of harvest on the bottom with a population of adult females in that harvest on the y-axis. And like I mentioned earlier, we have 6 cougar management zones in the state. Just for your reference, we're Zone B here in Southern Oregon, and a little bit on the coast in Curry County is Zone A. And then green, yellow, red, good, okay, bad. and then each line, of course, is the harvest. So all of our female harvest ever, or not ever, but since 97, has been below this critical zone of 35%. You can see they dip into 25% a little bit every now and then, but for the most part, we are doing good with our proportion of females in the harvest, which again indicates that the population is very strong. Um, and I should mention that you can see kind of they jump up a little bit in this yellow zone. In our agency in wildlife management, we try to do everything on 3-year averages, because it's very easy to either have very good survey conditions one year or very good harvest one year, or vice versa, very bad harvest, bad survey conditions. So um, and so when you plot that on a trend line like this, you can see spikes or dips, real sharp dips. And if you just see that, you could do a lot of flip flopping in regulations and restrictions and changes. So to kind of even that out and get a more accurate feel for what's going on, usually management decisions are made on 3-year averages. So for example, if this were to continue up for another 2 years and stay up, then it's like, okay, that's not just a fluke, it's something real going on. Let's change some management techniques and try to get that back down into this good zone here. So that is that. Now we'll do a little bit of identification. Again, wildlife conflicts, kind of my main duty here. A lot of times I get people calling up, oh, I had a cougar outside my door. I have the tracks on my deck, or the tracks in my yard. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll explain the tracks. Well, I could see the claw prints right in the tracks. Well, okay. So if there's claw prints in the tracks, chances are it's not a cougar. So just like your house cat, cougars, they're felines, they got retractable claws just the same. So when they leave tracks, they're not usually gonna leave their claw prints. There's always exceptions if they're running or something, their claws might dig out a little bit, but they're gonna be narrow, sharp claws, not these thick, stout claws you see on a dog print. So that's the first and main telling sign of when you might think you see a cougar print out. There's no claw prints. The other main one is going to be with the main pad here. So the dogs, most of you have probably seen a dog print. It's got this kind of unique triangle shape to it, where the cougar is not going to have that center ridge. It's gonna look sort of M shaped here. So those are the main telling points between the two. The claws are almost always the main factor. I mean, if you see claws in a track, it's not a cougar. It's going to be a dog or some other canine. So just a little info there for you. So the Jackson Creek project summary. This was a study I wanted to bring up because it did provide a good basis for a lot of the information we have today and that we use when talking to the public and kind of just give us a better understanding of cougar behavior. So essentially here in Southern Oregon, we did this study. I want to say it was late 90s, early 2000s when the study was conducted. So not too long ago, but essentially 103 cougars were captured, basically split 50-50 between males and females. One of the main takeaways we found, these cougars that were caught, they had VHF collars put on them, so we could go out with some equipment and pick up a radio signal where they were and detect where they were, and kind of plot those points on an interval of whenever we detected them. And essentially we found out a few things. One of the interesting things that I talk with landowners a lot about is their home range. A lot of times I'll get calls from people, they're concerned because they've seen a cougar or them and their neighbors have seen a cougar in their neighborhood maybe for for a few days or a week, and they're worried that that cougar may be starting to call that place home. And I kind of refer back to this study to kind of put them at ease that, look, yeah, they're there right now, but these animals have an extremely large home range, 200 square miles for a male and 80 square miles for a female. And they are territorial creatures, and they will patrol that entire home range. So essentially, what I tell landowners is, yeah, it might be there right now, and it might be there for a few more days, maybe even another week, but it's not going to set up shop and be there forever, because they're mobile and they want to patrol that entire home range all over. So that a lot of times puts people at ease that they're not going to have a cougar in their backyard for the next 5-6 years. So very large home range, very territorial. Males are bigger than females, and that kind of leads me to the thing. Next topic: males are bigger than females. Of that study, males weighed between 40 and 170 pounds of all animals caught, average being 110. So again, a lot of times I'll get calls of people worried, and they say giant cougar weighs 200 pounds. There are 200-pound cougars in this world. There are not very many 200-pound cougars where we're at. There's not very many 200-pound cougars anywhere. They do get a little bigger in Eastern Oregon and the Rockies, but I've seen a lot of cougars come into my office where I've been able to weigh them, and a very big male is about 140 pounds. And as this states, 110 pounds, 120 pounds, I see a lot of those for fully mature males. And then, of course, females, they're smaller, 40 to 90 pounds, average 71 pounds. And then the other thing this study did was reproduction is occurring at all times of the year. And I kind of mentioned earlier how we needed both of the premolar teeth to age cougars. And part of that has to do with this reproduction occurring at all times of the year. So with many species, they're born essentially in the spring. So the way the tooth grows, when nutrients are a little more poor in the winter, it makes a defining point on that tooth. So you can kind of judge that, okay, this is the first defining point. That means that it's coming up, that's its first winter, it's coming up on about a year old. With cougars, since they breed at all times of year, you can't really do that. You don't know if that's necessarily coming up on its first winter, or whether that's its second winter because it was born in the middle of winter. So it makes it very tough, and that's why the two teeth are needed to kind of check each other on when those cougars, what their true age is. So that was Jackson Creek project. Provided some good information, and yes, these are cougar kittens. I've had people say, surprised at the spots. They look like bobcats, but they do have spots for quite a while. You can see the long tail here, and they'll have spots. They'll have spots for close to the first year of life. So let's go on here. Just a real quick, wanted to dive into some human safety and conflict type stuff with cougars. I do want to say, everything we talk about is kind of worst case scenario in these next few slides, but overall, cougar encounters with people are very minimal. They really don't want anything to do with people, and it's very rare. I mean, nationwide, you can see more people are killed by bees, dogs, and spiders than by cougars. Incidents with cougars are extremely rare. Although they have increased in the past few years, and mainly that's due to our increasing cougar population to what we have now, as well as our increasing urban populations. The cities are getting bigger, they're growing, people are expanding out into the country a little more. Those rural areas, those rural houses going into cougar habitat, which is, with the amount of cougars we have, is sort of limited anyway. So conflict and in encounters is going to go up a little bit. This graph here, these are complaints that we have received in our office. So Jackson, Josephine, and Curry County for the year 2020. So last year, 2020. Over here, we have human safety complaints. So this is people seeing a cougar and they're concerned about it for human safety reasons. Or one step up from that would be it did something aggressive. It either was coming by their house several times during daylight when they couldn't chase it away, or it physically growled, or didn't back away when startled. So that's human safety. On the left here, we had 76 calls of damage. Typically, all cougar damage is livestock predation. The three most common are chickens, sheep, and goats. Every now and then we get a llama. Every now and then we get a calf. Every now and then we'll get a horse that's injured by a cougar, usually with just some scratches on its back. But I've never seen a cougar or a horse killed by a cougar. They put up a little too much of a fight for a cougar. And then finally, we got 2 calls of, or actually, these weren't even calls. These were just incidents of sick cougars, both of which were euthanized by staff. They were just very emaciated and definitely not going to make it. So anyway, we have cougar issue conflict in the Southern Oregon here, both safety and damage. That being said, I do want to highlight this here. We have only ever had one documented attack on a person in Oregon's entire history. So that some of you might have remembered in 2018, I believe, there was a woman killed up out of the Portland area on the Zigzag Trail by a cougar. That's the only documented attack, fatality or attack we've ever had in the state's history. And actually, even on the entire West Coast, I think there's only been 3 fatalities ever. There might have been another one recently, but the point is they're very rare. Most of the time, cougars don't want anything to do with people. So, but they are a big predator, and they do cause a little concern to some people. So we do have some precautions here I want to go over. Biggest thing is being alone. Don't hike or do outdoor things without having a buddy. To my knowledge, every cougar attack that has ever happened on the West here has been people alone. Well, actually, I think that just changed, but most of them are people alone. It increases your chances of something happening more so than with a group. And then, of course, just the obvious: don't approach a cougar if you see it. Like I said, want to avoid confrontation. Give them a way to escape. Most of them do not want anything to do with a person. Case in point, I have this video here. So before I started, I'll point out, like right here on these steps, that is the cougar. So this is a security camera footage of a house here in Southern Oregon. And pay attention as the video plays up in this corner here. You'll see a light and a person come out. So let's play this here. So what you saw there was, you see the cougar walking. Let's reset this here. You saw the cougar walking all nonchalant by the house here. Up in the corner, you see the guy turn on the light and come out, and he starts walking the other way. The cougar sees him and is like, "Oh, there's a dude. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm getting out of here as fast as he can." Turns and runs away. This landowner here if I remember correctly, he did not know anything about this cat until he saw this video footage later. So we'll play it one more time. So again, just kind of reiterates, they really don't want anything to do with people. You are not prey in their eyes. You are a threat in their eyes for the most part. So in the unlikely event that there is a little more brazen cougar, these are a few main things to do if it's staring at you, not scared of you, or approaching you. You do not want to run away. The running instinct may cause that instinct to chase. If any of you have house cats and you start waving a toy on the ground real quick, that just can't seem to help but chase it. Same with a cougar. Face that animal, make eye contact, know where it is at all times. Make sure it knows that you know it's there. If you have small children, pick them up so they don't panic and run. This one, we say it a lot, and it's always kind of funny to me, but it I guess try your best as you can. Pick them up without bending over, and I know that can be difficult if it's a small kid. Yeah, you kind of almost have to bend over, but the idea is you don't want to make yourself look small. You want that cougar to look at you and see you as a big predator and something not to be messed with, which goes along with this slide. You can raise your arms, make yourself look bigger. If you got a jacket, you can open it up. If you have stuff in your pocket, or you can get branches or dirt or something without bending over, you could throw those at it. It's always surprising to me how animals react, in my experience, when you could be talking to them, you could be trying to scare them, wave your arms, and they might not be too intimidated, but as soon as you throw something and it hits them, how that can kind of just change, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm out of here. This guy touched me with something, I'm leaving. So throwing something could be a good defense. This I'd like to reiterate here is, if you do see one, speak firm and in a loud voice. And I like to just emphasize that don't yell or scream at it, because it can be, the idea is that might simulate a wounded prey or something a little more natural to it, where if you're just talking in a loud, firm voice, you sound like a big human trying to scare it off, not a frightened other animal that's trying to get away. So don't scream, just speak a loud, firm voice. And again, these things don't happen very often. If you're being attacked, this happens even less often, but good to know, just in case any of you are ever out there and something does happen. If you're attacked, fight back. That's, don't roll up in a ball. Don't wait for you want to fight back. That if you have backpacks on, leave your backpack on. That'll help protect your back. Always try to face the animal. Use whatever you can. Grab rocks, garden tools, camping gear. Cougars, their eyes are a very sensitive part of their body. Go for their eyes, their nose, and you just want to fight back and don't stop fighting until that thing's gone. You do sort of have, as a human, an evolutionary advantage, I guess you could say, for a cougar. There were no primates here when they were evolving, so they're not used to killing something with a round skull like we have. They evolved going after the elongated skulls of ungulates like deer and elk, and that's what their jaws are used to, biting down on that back of that skull and getting a good grip on that skull. What we've seen from the few cougar attacks that there have been is they can't get a grip on the human skull. It's too round and their jaws don't open wide enough, so they're constantly, their teeth are always sliding off on both directions. So in a sense, you got that evolutionary advantage of a round head that just makes it difficult for them. But the point is, I kind of digress. So the point is, fight back, fight until they leave. Don't stop fighting. Some property tips. Don't feed wildlife. We always recommend do not ever feed wildlife. In relation to this presentation, it can attract prey. And if prey is coming to a certain spot at all times of the day, cougars are smart. They're going to know. They're going to be like, hey, all these deer keep coming to this one apple tree or this one grain bucket every day, and they're there a lot. I'm gonna sit there. That way I don't have to run and chase after these deer. So that'll bring predators in. Landscaping, they like they're cats. They like to be sneaky and stealthy and want to hide. So clear some vegetation up around your house, around walkways, so you can see far. That way they can't be kind of hiding. Outdoor lighting, another one. Those motion activated lights at night when a cougar walks by, it's dark and all of a sudden light turns on. That can sometimes startle them and keep them away. And of course, your pets. Cougars, we have documentation from people who have had cougars attack a variety of pets. Larger dogs are no exception, although they are a little more rare. Typically, the main pets that cougars are going after those smaller dogs, say sub 25 pounds, and then house cats. Believe it or not, the cougars will go after house cats quite a bit. If you do have livestock and cougars in the area, we recommend maybe bringing them into a barn or a paddock closer to your house at night till the cougars out of the area. And then children. This is kind of just a list of what I already talked about, but make sure they know that. They're smaller, so just naturally they look like a little easier prey to cougars. If they can follow these tips I outlined, they'd be the most benefit from them. Playing alone is one that we really stress: do not play alone. And the main reason for that is again. Strength in numbers is one reason. Two, if something does to happen, there's other kids make a ruckus and try to scare it off, or other kids that can run and go get an adult to get help. So don't play alone. That's key. So that's kind of the sum of the human safety stuff I want to talk about. But I just want to end it really reiterating that these are such rare events of a cougar. Bothering a person in any way. I wouldn't worry about your walks or your kids playing outside. I mean, just educate them just so they have that knowledge. But the chances of anything happening are practically zero. It's almost never a case of one day there's no cougar and the next day there's an aggressive cougar. It's more of a progression than that in most cases, where you might start seeing a cougar every now and then. That cougar might start coming around during the daytime. That cougar then might not be running away as quick from you when he sees you. Then he might not run away at all. He might just walk. So there's a lot of times a progression like that where we can kind of hone in and warn people of potential cougars that might be an issue. But even so, this cougars being aggressive towards people is so rare that, I just want to emphasize that it's so rare that it almost never happens. So that's the main bulk of my presentation. I did kind of want to end on these slides here because I think they're pretty cool. They're one of my favorite sequences of trail camera photos we have. With cougars. And so basically what this is, we have some annual deer migration cameras. This is a deer migration trail we have. These cougars, this is from back in 2019. This first photo here is October 7th. And it's hard to see a little bit here, but this is a adult female, and there's 3 kittens. You can see the eye of one here up in front of the female, and then another one here and another one here. Um, I don't know exactly how old these kittens are. You know, if I had to guess, I'd say somewhere 8, 10 weeks, maybe 12, somewhere in there. You know, they're big enough to be mobile with the adult female, but they're still pretty tiny. You can definitely see their spots. And anyway, we kind of got this cool progression over time. So this was again October 7th. We got them again on the 30th. Not all the kittens are in this photo, but we got the adult female and then one kitten here on the log. It's kind of hard to see, but there's another one back in here. So that's about 20 days between those two. And then we jump again. Here we got December 19th. So a couple months later, you see the adult female and the two kittens back here. The third kitten was up front here. I grabbed this photo just because it showed the adult female the best. But you can see they're bigger. They don't quite have all the spots on the side anymore. And then finally, 2 months later from that, on February 16th, there's a good photo of all 4 of them again. Adult female in the front, the 3 kittens in the back. You can see the spots on the sides are almost completely faded. There's a little bit of patchiness every now and then you can see. They still got some stripes on their legs from the spots, but for the most part they're getting big. And so a lot of times we'll get calls of a pack of cougars is running around the neighborhood. Well, cougars are pretty solitary. When they are traveling together, 9 times out of 10, it's this situation. It's an adult female that has juveniles with it. These cats here, they aren't even really ready to leave the female, even though they look big. They're getting close to her size. They're going to hang around with her probably, probably into the summer before they kind of break off on their own. So they can get quite big while they're learning to hunt and kind of following mom around and figuring things out before they leave, which can sometimes give this false sense that there's packs of cougars running around the area. But so that's just a really cool representation of how they grow over time. This is the very first photo, so back in October. So kind of them at their smallest and them at their biggest of what we got. So that's kind of the bulk of the presentation there. I put my email address down here at the bottom. If anybody ever has any questions, or if you think of a question, tonight when you're laying in bed and you want to ask me, just feel free to reach out to me anytime. Yeah. And so with that, I will say I'm done, and I look forward to any discussion or questions you guys have.
Thank you very much, Matthew. We do have some questions. I'll go ahead and just launch right in. Sarah asks, why do people hunt bobcats? Trophy, fur, or food, or something else?
Yeah, so bobcats is mainly fur. And I guess there have been people that I've talked to that do eat them. But I would say a bulk of it is fur. And like I said, prices vary from year to year, and it's not necessarily a lucrative venture. It's more just a way to connect with early pioneers of Oregon and their traditions, and kind of make a little money to pay for your gas while you're doing your hobby.
Phil asks, at what age do bobcats typically die from natural causes?
So majority of them are probably the 6, 7, 8-year-old range. I think if you get in there, you're pretty good. I do believe we've had some teeth come back older than that. I want to say, I don't know for sure, but I want to say we've had some come back 15 years old as well. So they can live quite a while, some of them.
Sarah asks, would Oregon limit the bobcat harvest if the population declined or the mean age declined?
Yeah. So if we saw a decline like that, again, we do kind of everything over averages, usually 3-year averages. So if we saw a definite downward trend, There's a few options we could do. We could either shorten seasons, or we could, or yeah, limit harvest. So right now, um, the season, like I mentioned, was December 1st through the end of February. Um, in Western Oregon, there's basically no limit on the number of bobcats a person can take. That being said, most people don't take very many, most individuals. Um, for Eastern Oregon, the limit right now is just 5 a year. So there is a limit over there. And most of that's due to the fact that, again, fur being a main driving factor for people going out. The Eastern Oregon bobcats are a little bigger, a little fluffier, got a little bigger better fur. So there's a little more demand for people going after those guys. But yes, in short, we would limit harvest.
Maxine asks, wouldn't turkey vultures eat the animal carcass between the kill day when the rich organs are taken and the second night?
They will. They'll definitely go sit on it. For a turkey vulture, or even 5 or 6 turkey vultures to consume the entire carcass in a day is pretty unlikely. They'll take a good chunk out of it, but majority of that carcass is going to be there the following evening. And they bury it sometimes, which can help. And depending on time of year, there might not be very many turkey vultures around to find it in that time frame. So, but yeah, the other smaller scavengers will go after it too. Foxes, raccoons, skunks, in the early evening. Even bobcats will. I tried to find it for you guys. Unfortunately, I couldn't. But there's an interesting video we have of a bobcat actually burying a deer carcass. And it turns out the deer carcass was killed by a cougar. So the cougar came in, chased the bobcat away, and finished eating on the carcass. So yeah, other things will get it in time, but the bulk of the meats is still there for the cougar.
Seema wonders, what are the different sounds a bobcat makes and the meaning of those sounds? Would they attack a person? And what does it mean when they wag their tail?
There's a variety of sounds both cougars and bobcats can make. Usually the aggressive sound is going to be growling. What you could think of as a growling. I don't know if anybody has a house cat and you've heard it growl when it's mad. Same sort of sound, just a lot louder because it's coming out of a cat a lot bigger. As far as a tail shaking, I'm not too sure if that necessarily has a behavior component. It might just be bugs or something bugging it. I'm not too sure on that one, but if anybody's interested in more sounds, YouTube has a lot of different recordings from these guys. They make all sorts of hisses and whistles, and sometimes even like high-pitched screams. Pretty interesting if you're willing to listen to that stuff.
Nona is asking about how the state determines the 3,000 cougar limit.
So I'm not certain on why that number was picked. I think it was, I would assume it just happened to be some sort of, what probably happened was there was a estimate on the carrying capacity of the state and what a healthy population would be. And that was somewhere in between there. And then of course we had input. When we do those management plans, we get input from various different groups, from animal rights groups, from hunter groups, from livestock groups. And it's kind of, everybody's putting in their input. So that was probably a number that just kind of fit somewhere in there to make everybody happy, in addition to meeting our management criteria of what we thought a healthy population in the state, a minimum healthy population in the state would be.
I think you may have answered April's question about how to manage a cougar encounter with a human or pet. Did you have anything to add to that?
So small pets, if again, I guess you could treat them like small children. If you can pick them up, get them in your arms, without stooping over too much. Um, a lot of times, what we've seen is if a cougar does go after a pet and you're there, um, a pet looks a lot more like prey than a person. So often, if you see it and you jump out and say, start, hey, get out of here, cougar, start waving your arms. They see you. It's like, oh, okay, this isn't someplace I want to be, and they'll usually take off, and leave your pet alone. Um, I've had people say that that the cougar was there, and they actually hit it with a broom or something, and it took off running. So, um, you know, uh, if you know a cougar's in the area, my best advice is just if you got small pets, keep them in a yard close to your house. Cougars are mostly active dawn, dusk, and during the night. So if you can bring your pets in at that time, and if they do have to go out and do their business, go out with them at that time. That's probably the best management practice for that.
Seema is asking if you could describe cougar scat.
Cougar scat, it's well, the first thing I'll say is a lot of times they'll bury it, just like your cat will bury stuff in a litter box. Um, the size, I mean, it's hard to describe. It could be fairly large. I would say a half inch to an inch in diameter. Usually it's segmented and can be blocky. A lot of times it'll have a lot of fur in it. Again, deer is their main source of food. So, and they don't peel back the hide; they just eat right through it, and that hair doesn't get digested. So that's usually a telling factor. Is there's a lot of hair in it.
Susan and Anne Marie are asking about the effects of wildfires destroying habitat, what the impact might be, and if it may have changed, added more conflicts between humans and farm animals. And Anne Marie also further asks about drought, if you could comment on both of those.
Mhm. So we'll start with the wildfires. I haven't noticed an increase in areas adjacent to the wildfires. That's not to say there isn't a slight one. It might have pushed the cougars down, but those wildfires, especially like thinking back to last fall, like the Alameda fire and the Butte Falls fire, we had open chain fire. They went through pretty quick. Those cougars might have been displaced out of a portion of their home range for a little bit, but as soon as those fires are out, there's things going back into those burn scars fairly quickly. A lot of that fire that was low intensity, it burnt through, and a month later, all the acorns didn't burn up, so the acorns fell, which brought the deer back in, which the cougars are going to follow the prey, so they probably went back in. So if you have the large, heavy, intense fires that just scorch the earth and turn it into moonscape where nothing grows for years, that's definitely going to shift territories and patterns a little bit. But like we talked about earlier, cougars have such a big home range that it's unlikely that a fire burnt up their entire home range. So they might just shift their home range a little bit, and they're territorial. They might go into somebody else's home range a little bit as well. Those home ranges aren't defined necessarily perfect boundaries. There is a little bit of overlap. So, I would say there's a little bit of displacement with certain fires, but nothing major. As far as drought goes, again, especially here in Western Oregon, even on drought years like this year, we have year-round streams just about, fairly close all over the place. So with those home ranges being big, the chances of there being at least one year-round stream in there on a drought year is fairly good. Um, I think the biggest thing we see, and not necessarily related to cougars, but in wildlife and all in general, when it comes to drought years, is people thinking that, oh, it's a drought year, I got to put water out for this wildlife. It can't get water everywhere else, and we discourage that. That's a great way for disease to get transferred between wildlife very quickly. Deer especially. Uh, we have several hemorrhagic diseases that affect deer, and putting water out for them just spreads that through a population real quick and can be detrimental. And then of course, same with feeding them. If you're putting water out for them, not only can you spread disease for them, but you're also unnaturally congregating them, which could unnaturally congregate cougars in that area too, that see deer coming into an area. So that would be the biggest concern I have with drought is the people factor.
Anne Marie asks, she wants to know what proportion of roadkills affect cougars, like a link between roadkills and how it might affect cougars in our region.
It's not very significant at all. I want to say probably, I'm just trying to think this year alone. We maybe had one in our area in Jackson, Josephine County. It's not a lot. Again, they're pretty stealthy. They're very good eyesight, very good hearing. They're really, if a car's nearby, they're really not going to want to run across the road. Usually when they are moving, it's in the middle of the night when the roads are least traveled. So it's pretty rare that a cougar does get hit by a car. But when it does happen, we know about it fairly quick because luckily people aren't used to seeing a roadkill cougar, so they call us when they do see it.
Maximo asks if there is a poaching problem with cougars in Oregon.
I wouldn't say there's a poaching problem with cougars specifically, no more so than just poaching in general in Oregon. I think the biggest thing with cougar poaching that goes on is people are out hunting with a license and a deer or elk tag. They're out hunting for deer, elk, and those people that are dishonest, they don't have a cougar tag in their pocket at that time. They're hunting for deer. They see a cougar, they shoot the cougar, and then they go back after the fact and buy a tag, which is illegal. You have to have the tag if you're going to kill the animal. But I think that out of all this giant spectrum of poaching for cougars, that's probably the most common. And I think we do a pretty good job of catching them because the old adage, criminals necessarily aren't that smart. They'll either, their story won't add up when we're talking to them, or they'll say they killed the cougar at one time, but then their tag will have a purchase date and time of a time after that. So we do look at that stuff and try to catch it when we can. I don't think there's much poaching that goes on where we don't see the animal, if that makes sense. So the cats that are poached, we are collecting samples from. They are getting counted in our mortalities because those poachers, they can't do anything with that animal, whether we take it to a butcher shop or take it to a taxidermist, unless they get one of our tags here that you saw the photo of, the ones for the bobcats. We have ones for cougars that are very similar. They're red. And unless they have that tag saying they checked it in at our office, it's an illegal cat. So therefore they kill it illegally, but they try to do some workaround, which we try to do a good job of catching on our end. And it happens, unfortunately. We do have a turn-in poachers program where organizations like Oregon Hunters Association offer rewards for information to convict poachers. So it's always on our forefront. We work with Oregon State Police closely on that, but unfortunately, it does happen from time to time.
Sarah is asking about why the cougar growth has plateaued. You mentioned maybe it's due to carrying capacity. Do you think that's what they've reached?
I think so. Time will tell in the next few years if we see another bump, but Oregon's a finite space with a finite amount of prey. And we as humans are growing as well. So our population centers are getting bigger. Western Oregon prey sources for deer and elk, those are very strong. Those are doing good, but some of the prey sources in Eastern Oregon are declining a little bit, like mule deer. We don't have as many mule deer as we used to for a number of reasons, most of it being habitat related. All these factors combined, the cougar population isn't going to expand forever. It wouldn't in normal times without people, and it's not going to now. So I think 2017 we had 6,600 cougars, and now we're 4 years later and we have about the same amount. You saw on the graph a while ago how exponential that growth was for a while. I think it only makes sense to think that we're approaching, or we have approached, the carrying capacity for those animals in the state.
Nona asks, how well do cougars do in managed forests and clear cuts?
So it depends on the clear cut. So again, cougars are stealthy, so they're not going to be open. They're not going to be in them during the day when they're nice and visible. But if there's prey in those clear cuts, yeah, they'll go in them for sure to get those deer. What we've seen in recent years has been a shift. 20, 30 years ago, when we had clear cuts happen, we'd go through, we'd clear all the timber and remove it, and that'd be it. And within a year or two, you'd have all this fresh growth of shrubs and grasses come back, which would provide excellent forage for deer and elk and bring them in, and they eat on that and cause real high densities of deer and elk in those areas. And if there's high densities of deer and elk, there'd be high densities of predators coming to get them, like cougars. That being said, what we've seen recently on private timberlands that are doing clear cuts to help the marketable timber grow faster, they're going through their clear cutting, and then a lot of times they'll put a herbicide down, which kills a lot of those shrubs and grasses that the deer and elk eat, and allows more nutrients to go to the marketable timber, the pine trees, which isn't really great forage. So in more recent years, we've seen those clear cuts be less beneficial for deer and elk. In return, there's not as many there. So in return, there's not as many cougars there because of that.
Victoria would like you to explain why more males are harvested than females. She adds that she doubts that the hunter stops to tell the difference.
There's a variety of factors. One being males are more mobile. Like I said, they got a bigger home range, so they're moving around more. So more chance encounters for hunters. They're a little more aggressive and territorial. So for those hunters that are going out and targeting cougars with, say, predator calls, they might be more apt to come in on them. Whereas the females have a smaller home range. They're not as nomadic. If they do have kittens, they're usually, if they have kittens with them, they're illegal to take by hunters. So if a cougar is seen with smaller kittens, like these pictures here that you see on the screen, by law, the hunter has to let them pass. So that's a main reason right there, is that it's illegal to kill a female with kittens. So There's times in their life, big portions of their life really, where they're protected by law, where males aren't. That's the main reason.
Maxine asks you to comment on how cougars hunt. Are they solo hunters or do they hunt in packs?
No, they are very solo hunters. They're very solitary animals. The only time that they are really going together is in situations that you're seeing on the screen right now with these kittens and the female. So during that first year of life, year and a half of life, as those kittens are growing, they're watching the adult female. They're learning how to hunt. She's helping them. In that scenario, they might be hunting in packs, but even then, they're not really all going after one animal. So, speaking to like a livestock side, because that's where we can really see this happen, is if a person has a bunch of sheep out in the field and there's 2 or more cougars killing a sheep in one night, usually it's one cougar's over here on this sheep, well, another cougar's on this sheep, and then it might go to this sheep. There's never 2 cougars necessarily on one sheep. That doesn't really happen like you would think of coyotes or wolves doing. So they are very solitary hunters. And once they get to adulthood, I mean, they're essentially on their own completely. The adult males, especially. I mean, they'll come to female to breed for a few days, a week. Once she's bred, they're off on their own again by themselves.
Maximo asks how you distinguish a domestic dog track from a wolf print.
A wolf print is going to be a lot bigger. I mean, let me see. I got a reference here for the exact size. So a wolf print going to be about 4 inches wide minimum, and could be anywhere up to 5 inches long. I mean, you're looking at wolves. They're huge animals compared to dogs, but the size of their feet proportionally to their body is even that much bigger. So your average wolf, say 100 pounds here, which is much bigger than most dogs. But even if you got some 100-pound Great Dane or something, and you compare those feet, that Great Dane, which weighs as much as that wolf, is going to have a lot smaller paws than that wolf. So really the main thing's size. I mean, if you just got to measure, because they do look similar. They're if you have a pup wolf, I mean, it's going to look very similar to a dog, but the measurement's going to be the main thing.
Catherine has a comment that I thought of also while you were giving your presentation. She read recently that older cougar males were safer to be around than younger ones and had fewer conflicts, but it sounds like your goal is to keep the population young. What are your thoughts on that?
Our goal is not to keep the population young. Our goal is to keep healthy amounts in each age category. So, and what I would say to that is, you're looking at two sort of things here. So younger males, they're like teenagers sort of. They might be a little braver. They might be willing to go get sheep or something, get livestock, maybe be a little more bold. Maybe not learned as much about humans being a threat to them. Then you get a little older, they get a little wiser. They realize, hey, I don't want anything to do with people. They seem like they're bad news. But then you can have a transition too, where they get so old that they're no longer physically able to go after agile deer and other natural prey, where their only way to sustain themselves without starving to death is to go start going after sheep and goats that are confined to this pen and a lot slower. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're young cougars versus old cougars are more or less dangerous. I would say they have sort of two different mindsets, and both have the capability to cause conflict, just maybe for different reasons, I guess.
Seema asks what a bobcat's home range is.
That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. It's nowhere near as big as a cougar's. And again, males are going to be bigger than females in that sense. I would guess it's going to be probably about a quarter of that of a cougar. So maybe males would be 30 to 50 square miles and females would be 10. Again, if you want to get my email there and email me that to remind me, I can look up the answer for you later this week and get you a definitive answer.
Coletta comments about or mentions the book The Beast in the Garden by David Barron. I was wondering if you're familiar with it and can comment on it.
I am not familiar with that, but I will definitely look it up and see what it's about.
El Havel asks, if the state is reaching carrying capacity and cougars are so territorial, are you seeing more conflict with juveniles as they get kicked out of their home range?
I wouldn't necessarily say there's more conflict with juveniles specifically. I think we have seen an increase in conflict in, say, the past 10 years. That sort of plateaued as well. But it's not just juveniles, it's all age classes and sexes. It's a cougar sees a sheep or a goat in a pen. I mean, it's kind of hard to resist if they're hungry. It's this slow moving fat animal that can't get away from it, so it's an easy meal. I wouldn't say there's necessarily one age class that does more damage than the other. Those juveniles, they'll migrate a long ways to find a territory of their own. Males are always dying of one sort or another, so there's always a vacuum for them to go into. So I can't say they're causing more conflict than others.
Victoria mentions that there was a woman that was killed by a cougar a few years ago when hiking on Hunchback Mountain near Mount Hood, and that she was hiking by herself.
Yes. Yeah, so that's what I was referring to as the one and only cougar fatality in the state of Oregon's history. Just briefly on that, yes, she was hiking by herself. We determined after the fact, once she was found, that a cougar had killed her just based on the wounds, the way it was buried. It appears that that the cougar was following her for a ways and she knew it. It seemed like she was running from it almost, just based on the way how her belongings were scattered along the trail. So yeah, that's the one and only cougar fatality we've had. It was I believe that was a female cougar. I don't know exactly. I believe it was a 3.5 or 4.5-year-old cougar, if I remember correctly. Not a super big cougar. I think it weighed in around 75 pounds. That woman, she was not a very large woman. She was pretty tiny, to my recollection. So, it does happen. And that's why I did want to go through my presentation on some safety tips. But it is very rare.
You mentioned for safety, not hiking alone. El Havo wonders if you could increase your safety by hiking with a dog.
Yeah. If you have a little wiener dog out there, I don't think that would do much good. But yeah, if you got like a Labrador or a medium sized, a large dog, absolutely, it'll definitely help, especially if he's around you. That being said, there has been instances where cougars will attack dogs that size, but in general, a cougar's like any other cat, and a dog is a dog. They like to chase cats, and cougars run from dogs. So it's why hunting cougars with hounds is so effective, because those cougars want to get away from that hound. Those hounds chase it. Same with a dog. A dog barking can be wonders on chasing a cougar away.
SEMA wonders if cougars and bobcats interact or get along.
I wouldn't say they get along. They probably cross paths every now and then. I did mention that one video I had of a cougar or a bobcat trying to steal a cougar's kill, and the cougar coming and chasing them off. The cougar's the dominant predator in that case. The bobcat is not going to stick around. He's not going to try to defend himself. He's not going to try to defend a kill. If the cougar is coming, the bobcat's running the other way. I would even imagine, I mean, I don't necessarily have any documentation or proof of this, but I would imagine at some point in history, cougars have killed a bobcat or two for food somewhere in the US at some point in history. It's a smaller animal, and they're not going to be picky. If they can catch it, they're going to eat it. So
Phil has a book recommendation, The Cougar, Beautiful, Wild, and Dangerous by Paula Wild. Coletta asks if this recording will be available. It is. I responded. If you go to YouTube and search JJSWA, you can view all of our webinars. This one will become available in a little while. Laura wonders if you could tell us more about VHF collars.
Yeah, so that is one of our they've been around for a long time. It's been one of our primary tools that we've used up until now. Of course, there's other things kind of replacing them at this point, but VHF collars, basically, they are a collar, dependent on the species, whether it's a cougar or a bear or deer elk. The shape and width of the collar might be a little different, but essentially there's a box with a battery and a transmitter in it and an antenna that wraps up and sticks around. We put those collars on the animal, and what it does is it sends out a little bleep on a certain radio frequency. Typically it's one bleep per second, so there's beep, 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 and we can go out with a big antenna that is directional, and we can listen for that beep, and depending how loud it is, determines how far away it is. So it's real faint, it's probably way far off. So you get a little closer, you may drive a road or hike, you listen, it's super loud. Okay, well that animal is probably within 500 yards over that direction. So there you go, you have a location of that animal at that time with that beep. The other cool thing about them is, I mentioned it's a beep per second. A lot of them at the time had a mortality signal also, so you knew, oh, that animal's dead, I should go investigate. So basically, those older collars, when the animal didn't move for 24 hours, there was no movement, that bleep every second would turn into beep 2 every second. So instead of beep beep, it'd go beep 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 beep. So okay, that animal's dead down there for whatever reason. I'm going to go investigate, and you can find it You could do a necropsy, you collect your collar. So those were the VHF collars, and we still sort of have that technology today. Um, but most of them are also combined with actual GPS collars. So uh, there's two kinds. There's a store on board. They just take a GPS point. That collar has actually time to blow off at a certain time, so we can go pick it up and collect it. Or there's some that will actually transmit up to the satellite and come back down to our computer, and we can get almost live real-time data on where animals are based on that GPS point. So those collars are more expensive. They don't last as long because it takes a lot more battery power to send that GPS signal, but it's a lot more real-time data and more data points because we're not physically out there listening and marking a point. We're getting automatic points of where it's at. So those wildlife collars are a very vital tool from what we use, and a very interesting tool.
Adam wonders if you could tell us anything about any experiences you've had with animal activist groups that are trying to make hunting cougars illegal.
You know, we have a variety of groups that believe very firmly in no cougar hunting. You know, going through these management plans, like I talked about, they're one of the constituents that gives input. You know, us as wildlife managers, like I said, our mission statement earlier is for the enjoyment of all user groups, including hunting. So part of our mission is to manage wildlife populations for hunting and keep them healthy for hunting. Now, of course, you know, if the populations get bad enough, we're going to pull back on that a little bit because, you know, we want the healthy populations. But, you know, our mission is to help hunters and all users. And not only that, but when you look at the aspect of managing wildlife, so say you have cougars, and the mule deer is another good example. You know, the mule deer populations might be going down. We have hunting right now for cougars, which might be kind of curbing that a little bit. So if you got rid of cougars, those mule deer populations might drop even more faster because the cougars over there might increase, or shift at least. So you know, we always like having these different tools in the toolbox, we kind of say, of managing wildlife, hunting and trapping being one of them. Trapping for bobcats, there's no trapping for cougars, but you know, we get that. We understand where people are coming from, but you know, we're managing for all of Oregon, and when all of Oregon speaks, you know, we go that way. As I mentioned, in 1994, there's ballot measure 18, was put to a vote to end bear baiting and cougar hunting with hounds. The majority of voters in the state voted it to pass it. So, I mean, you know, we're obligated to go with the majority of the public and stop those hunting practices. But, you know, our main goal is always following our mission statement of managing wild populations to keep them healthy, to have enjoyment by all user groups.
I think Jordan has the smartest 7-year-old in the group. He's wondering if you could tell us how cougars regulate their body temperature.
Yeah, so cougars are a mammal just like us. So they generate their heat the same way we do with just their metabolism. So the food they eat, and when they break that down, the energy they get from it, we as humans, we keep our body temperature at about 98 degrees. Cougars are a little bit warmer than that, I believe. They keep their temperature at about 100. So, you know, with that, in the summertime, they're going to be looking for shade to help with that, under trees and in draws of you know, canyons where that cold air is going to settle. In wintertime, they are going to grow some more hair. Their coat's going to be a little thicker to help stay warmer. And also that because of their metabolism generating heat, they're going to need to eat more food in the wintertime too, to help stay warm. They go kill a deer, and and they eat that deer, it's going to help keep them a lot warmer than being on an empty stomach for a few days. So, several ways they manage their body temperatures.
Richard is wondering if you could tell us about interactions between cougars and wolves.
Yeah. Again, wolves are dogs, and it's dogs and cougars are natural enemies. So cougars they're not going to mess with wolves. Wolves are a pack hunter. Their strength in numbers. You get a single cougar and a single wolf. If they tussle, there's a good chance the cougar will probably come out on top. But as soon as you add a second wolf in there, the cougar has no chance. So, there's been, I don't think in Oregon, but in other areas, there's been situations where a cougar's killed a deer or a young elk or something, and the wolves sniff it out and find it and chase the cougar away and steal its kill. So, and in that case, the cougar's not going to put up a fight. He's all about self-preservation, and he's not going to defend that kill too much when he can just run away and climb up a tree and live to kill another deer.
Kathy wonders about cougars and climbing fences. Can they get over a 6 to 8 foot fence?
Yeah. Yep. They are going to climb. They'll climb anything your house cat would. If it's like a field fence, it's definitely going to help. They're not going to be able to climb that super great. If they really wanted over, they still probably could. But wooden fences, if there's any trees, they'll climb 30 feet up in a pine tree, no problem. So, but yeah, if you're looking for like defense against for your pets or your livestock, a tall wire fence like that definitely will help. It absolutely will help, but it's not going to be foolproof.
April provided a clarification on a previous question. She's wondering what ODFW does when a cougar encounter between a human or a pet is reported.
Sure. So Oregon has a very set sort of statute that a cougar has to meet for human safety before lethal removal is allowed. We do consider pets, any injury to pets as human safety, or livestock is considered quote unquote damage. Pets are human safety. So basically the criteria is, any attack is instantly bumped up. It meets that statute. Being seen twice during daylight hours near a residence also meets that statute. And then any aggressive actions such as growling, stalking, loss of wariness, where like you yell at it or you throw something at it, it doesn't care, that's going to meet that statute. So once that statute is met, there's a couple options from there. At that point, Oregon law, if you're outside of city limits, Oregon law does allow the landowner to take action so they can shoot the cougar on their property. If that happens again, every cougar that dies gets checked in through us. So they have to contact us. We take the same samples, everything. We take the whole carcass. In that situation, they can't retain any part of the carcass if they kill on human safety. Couple other avenues to that. Certain counties in the state, Jackson County is one of them, does pay for wildlife services, which is a federal agency under the U.S. Department of Ag. They can come out if that cougar's met statute and try to set up some traps to catch that cougar and lethally remove it. And then, of course, we work very closely with different police departments, and we do sort of give them leeway on determining human safety. So some of you might have remembered Ashland PD killed a cougar several years back, because it was displaying signs of aggression. They were worried about human safety. So those are the main things if a cougar is acting aggressive. But ultimately, it's up to the landowner. I mean, if they call and they have an aggressive cougar on their property, but they don't want it killed, they're just looking for advice. Well, okay, that's fine. That's up to them. We're not going to mandate that we go out and remove this cougar if they don't want it removed. We're a resource for the public. So we'll either give information, and if they want to go with that information, fine. If they want to go with just non-lethal stuff or the lethal, that's up to them. We do make recommendations based on what they say. And I will add one last thing that, a common question that comes up is, what about relocating these animals? And we have found over the years, especially human safety, that relocation is not really a viable option. We do not relocate animals that have caused conflict for several reasons. One, like I mentioned, they have giant home ranges. So if you take one animal, move it, and put it in another animal's home range, that could potentially cause conflict, especially if they're like two adult males or one's real aggressive and territorial. Two, that could transfer disease if that animal has a disease and we move it across state. That can facilitate disease transfer. Three, that animal has already learned potentially that humans are not a threat or livestock is an easy meal, and therefore will go find a home nearby where we release it. As vast as Oregon forests are, you really can't put a cougar deep enough in the forest where it's not going to eventually run into human habituation. And the final thing with relocation, a good example we have is a bear that we caught several years ago, back when we still were doing relocation. I think it's probably close to 20 years ago now, in East Medford. We moved it all the way over to near Bly, so almost like 100 miles east of here. Whenever we immobilize an animal with drugs, we put an ear tag in it to identify it. Well, 2 weeks later, that bear that we moved from East Medford all the way to Bly was killed by a hunter just outside of Medford city limits. So it knew exactly where it was and exactly which direction it needed to go to get back, and it traveled all that distance in a short amount of time. So they're very smart, and they will move long distances to be where they want to be.
Victoria asks a very intriguing question. She wonders if a scarf or hat with the image of eyes protecting your neck would be a good safety step.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to hurt. I think it could help a lot. I actually I've talked with some people from India that they said they don't even go out with the tigers there unless they have like something like that on their head. So if you have it and you want to put it on, I think it's not going to hurt, and it might help to some degree. So yeah.
Catherine wonders if you could comment on cougar or bobcat diseases, and if there's any documented poisoning, illegal poisoning.
I don't know of any documented illegal poisoning. Yeah, nothing in that sense springs to my mind. As far as diseases, there's several that they can get. Obviously, the big one that everybody's familiar with is rabies. Rabies in our area, and anything really, is pretty rare. We don't have terrestrial rabies in our area, so all of our rabies cases originate in bats here in Southern Oregon. So essentially, an animal would have to be bit or come into contact with infected bat fluids or bat carcass. So whether that's a cougar that ate a bat, or Foxes eat bats a lot, so it's a cougar that killed a fox. They can get rabies, so that's one. Um, Another one we were looking at pretty heavily a few years ago was nodular stomach worm. So it's just this big roundworm intestinal parasite that they can get, cause some nutrition deficiencies if they get big enough. Um, of course, there's all the ectoparasites, the fleas and ticks and mites that they get on their hide. Those are the main ones. There's various other ones they can get. Nothing super common. There's distemper is one. There's feline AIDS. There's a handful of them. Nothing really concerning at a population level though.
Victoria asked a follow-up about images of those eyed hats. I think you'd probably just have to do like an Amazon search or a Google search for sun hats with eyes. I bet that would be something that you could find online. Finally, lots of great questions tonight. I think Francis has oh no, we've got one extra question. Francis' question is, when a cougar is removed, how do wildlife services know they got the right cougar?
Short answer, there's no definitive way to tell 100%. That being said, like I mentioned earlier, how they'll kill something, eat portion of it, and then leave and come back the next night. Most of the cougars that wildlife services traps like that happen in that period. So landowner wakes up in the morning, there's dead sheep. Wildlife service will go out and they'll either drag that sheep into a trap or put traps around the sheep, depending on what kind of trap they're using. And the cougar comes back the following night, and 99.9% of the time, it's the cougar that killed that sheep. In addition to that, we do have a lot of cougars in the state. It's still a big state, so and they have big home ranges. So if you have a landowner that's been having issues and you catch a cougar on that landowner's property in that area, chances are pretty good that cougar's territory and that it's the one that was causing issues. So, but there's no definitive way to tell 100% unless you catch it out there. It's on the carcass eating it as you speak. You don't know for sure.
I think Maximo has the last comment. He said he got a message from Roger wondering if you could comment, how well do motion activated lights work, or barking dog alarms work to keep cougars away?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned earlier, there's kind of a escalation with cougars. If a cougar's around and it's the first time it's walking by a house and a light comes on, it's going to take out of there. If it's years down the line, because they're fairly long lived, 15, 20 years old, these guys can live out in the wild. So years down the line, if it's 100th time walking by a house and the light comes on, it might not be as spooked as that first time. It's kind of used to it at that point. So they do get over time used to things and habituated to things. Barking dogs, I don't think they get as habituated to, because it's an animal and it's unpredictable, and they're kind of, it works a little better than a light. There's other things you can buy for deterrence. There's things called fox lights. Some of them will fit on like T-posts or fence posts that light up, have like different light flashing patterns to scare things off. They'll make alarms. Again, those can work great for a while, but if it's a cougar that's been around the block and he knows that light's not necessarily a threat to him, it's not going to matter for him. Another one that I think works pretty well, and I think it works well all the time, is you go on Amazon and buy a motion activated sprinkler, hooks up to your garden hose, runs on some batteries. And that, you know, you just set it there, it trips, it has a noise when the sprinkler starts going, it has something physical hitting the animal, that water. And when it comes to stuff touching them, it's very hard, in my opinion, for the animal to get habituated to that. They, you know, things are touching them. That's in their space. That's something sort of assaulting them. They, whether it's its first time getting sprayed with water, or it's 100th time, in my opinion, it doesn't like it no matter what. So that's something I'd recommend if you, you know, if you have cougars around the area and you want to try to keep them out of a yard or out of your driveway or something like that. So.
Thank you very much, Matthew. The comments section, the chat section was rounded out with lots of thanks and appreciations. Really great talk tonight. I appreciate it a lot. And thank you for sticking around for all of the answers. That's it, everybody. Good night. Hang on a second, Matthew.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's all the riffraff. We have Peggy and Maxine left in the audience. Hi, Dennis. Dennis is a past board member. I'm going to make it so, I don't know if you guys want to share your screen or unmute yourselves. I just wanted to thank Matthew. After this is the first time we figured out how to wrap it up a little bit at the end of the session. Turns out kicking people out of the meeting is a 3-click process. You have to remove them from the meeting, click it again, and then say you don't want to report them. So, Matthew, did you get everything said that you wanted to say, or do you have any comments or suggestions?
No, I think there's a lot of good questions, and I think we covered the bases pretty well.
Great. I wanted to show you a picture since we're showing gruesome pictures. I had a deer that had been basically unzipped and its intestines were hanging out. And I set up can you see this? I set up my trail cam as the sun was going down. This is in December, and not 20 minutes later, so this at 5:54, the bobcat returned, and I presumed the bobcat killed the deer.
Yeah, that looks like a big bobcat.
It was a big bobcat. I was expecting a mountain lion.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a big bobcat.
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything else. If Peggy, Dennis, or Maxine have any questions or comments, otherwise I'll say good night.
Mute. This is
I
Maxine.
want to
don't know if
thank
can
you,
hear
Matthew, again for the time that you spent.
me. Mhm.
Yeah, no problem. So it's always fun doing stuff like this.
This is Maxine. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you